The vineyard gate buzzed like an old secret waking up. 12 years ago, that sound meant peace, coffee in my hands, dew on the vines, the quiet pride of a life I built myself. Today, it meant something else. A white SUV rolled in through the dust. My son stepped out. Men I hadn't seen since the day they cut the ribbon on a winery I wasn't invited to. Behind them, the polished wife I'd only met in photos, and two teenagers staring at me like I was a stranger. "Mom," my eldest said, his voice careful, like he was carrying glass. I smiled. "Good morning." But inside, I already knew why they were here. In this valley, families don't drive 3 hours on a weekday to apologize. They come when the bank calls first. 12 years of silence had brought them to my gravel driveway because their vineyard was sinking, and the woman they'd erased from their story might be the only one who could save it. What none of them knew was that I had already decided what kind of rescue I believed in, and it didn't involve forgiveness for sale. I had just set the mug on the counter when a white SUV eased past the welcome sign, tires hissing over the pea gravel, and stopped under the live oak like someone who didn't know whether to park or leave the engine running. The driver's door opened. My eldest son, Ethan, stepped out first, in a pressed shirt that hadn't seen a day's work in years. Levi, my younger one, climbed out on the passenger side more slowly, his shoulders tight like he was trying to make himself smaller. Behind them, a brunette slid out and smoothed her skirt with those fast, practiced hands I remembered from photographs. Sloan, the brand strategist's wife I had never met in person. The back door opened too. Two teenagers peered out, all knees and headphones and the careful blankness of kids who have been warned about adults. 12 years had passed since the last time I'd seen my boys in the flesh. 12 years since I stood in a crowded tasting room and watched a ribbon get cut at a place I wasn't invited to, pretending that the ache in my ribs was just the air conditioning. 12 years since somebody else's camera flash reflected off glass, and I told myself a mother didn't need a wristband to belong. Now they were on my gravel, under my oak tree, at the vineyard they used to tell friends didn't really count because it wasn't on the right side of Highway 29. I wiped my palms on my jeans, not because I was nervous, but because habit runs deeper than hurt. You wipe, you greet, you pour, you listen. The passenger door closed with a thoughtful thunk. Levi looked older than Ethan did somehow, the way people do when they've been catching punches you can't see. The girl in the back shot a quick look at me, brown eyes, round cheeks, someone's old soul in a young face, and then fixed her gaze on her phone. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice landed between us like a careful box with too many labels. Fragile, urgent, do not tilt. "Good morning," I said, because you can't pour from a cup full of old anger, not in the sunshine, not with dew still shining on the sycamores like the trees were dressed up for a dance. Sloan gave me a smile that showed too many teeth. "Margaret," she said, using my name like it tasted a little briny. "Thank you for seeing us." She glanced at the sign hanging from the eaves. Hayes Hollow. The paint had faded in a way I liked. Sun-licked. Honest. Like a quilt that's been folded and refolded. "Your place is big, Mom," Levi said quickly, scrambling behind the compliment as if he could drag it into something real. "I mean, it's beautiful." "Thank you," I said, and reached to roll the barn doors the rest of the way open. The smell came out like a warm sigh. Oak, old grape skins, soap, the faint shadow of lavender from last week's bundles drying in the rafters. I'd built the tasting counter out of reclaimed redwood the first winter I owned the barn. The boards were rough and scarred and smelled faintly of smoke when you sanded them, like they remembered a fire none of us ever saw. I ran my hand over a knot. I've always been fond of the places where something tried to grow right across a problem. "Come in," I said. "If we keep standing out here, the valley will think I've started a pop-up drive-through." The teenagers trailed behind their parents with that fresh deer alertness. A boy, the older, kept his hood up, fingers worrying the hem like he was crocheting with invisible yarn. The girl touched each barrel with her fingertips as she passed, like she was taking attendance. That small, tender habit nicked me in a place I didn't show anyone. I poured water into glasses. First rule of wine is hydration, whether you plan to drink or not, and set a plate of orange slices on the counter. Hospitality is a muscle you can exercise even when you've broken your heart jogging in place for a decade. Sloan scanned the chalkboard with the day's offerings, lips moving. August Smoke Jam, Golden Hour Verdure, Widow's Walk Preserves. You did well with the branding. She didn't manage surprise in her voice. She only managed evaluation. I didn't do branding. I did my work. People either taste it or they don't. Maggie, Mom, Levi said, eyes going raw around the edges. The old nickname fell out by accident and landed on the floor between us. He reached to pick it up with his tone. We need to talk. I looked at Ethan then, because oldest ones are always tall with opinion, even when they are tired. His jaw ticked. We wouldn't be here if it weren't serious. I could have guessed. The valley whispers with the speed of a barn cat. Every porch, every coffee line, every produce aisle in the co-op carries a piece of what's going on up the road. Prices fall, loans balloon. Wildfire smoke flattens the flavor of a year you watered with the last of your savings. People make big bets on little margins and pray. You can hear the prayer in the way the frost fans wobble at 4 a.m. Then let's talk, I said, and sat on my side of the counter. Their eyes drifted the way they always drift, to the photographs, no matter where you put them. The little gallery near the register with frames I'd collected one by one. My husband, Tom, under a sky so blue it hurts, his baseball cap pushed back, my hair in the wind, and my hands around a basket of figs, like I was holding them too gently to break the skin. The high school classroom where I taught sophomore English for 37 years. A black and white of me and a dozen farm worker women laughing with their heads thrown back, hands sticky with pectin, aprons ghosted with sugar. The last one was taken the day our preserves co-op finally got its wholesale license. I had a smear of jam on my cheek, and Rosa, my neighbor, my friend, was pointing at it in delight like I'd done something daring on purpose. Rosa had been the first person to knock on my little cottage door after Tom died. I had a list in my head: insurance, probate, the yellow chair that creaked no matter how carefully you sat. But grief makes your bones slosh. The morning after the funeral, when every corner of the house felt like the neighbor's house, she brought tamales and sat on my stoop until I took half. When the men showed up with glossy brochures about loans that could unlock the value of your home, she crossed her arms and stood on my porch step with me like a barn cat with a mother hen stare, and those men found their way down the walkway faster than they'd come up. When I wanted to get up at 5 and do something that wasn't cry, she put me in her pickup and drove me to the Gleaners.
The Gleaners taught me a lot about corners. A vineyard isn't tidy like the glossy photographs. There are odd corners where clusters catch and tumble and sweeten into something you can smell before you can see. There's the ground. Lord, you should have heard the way Rosa tutted at the ground where fruit lay in small purple moons, as if nobody cared about the sugar left behind. You're going to fall in love with what people leave, she said. What if I already have? I said. And we sat there in my tiny galley kitchen at 5:30 some morning, stirring the first batch I made in a pot so dented it rocked when you looked at it. I named that first jar after the Widow's Walk I didn't have. Widow's Walk Preserves. People laughed, then they bought, then they cried and bought 2 more because an honest name tastes like someone put their hand on your shoulder. But that was all later, before the jars and the chalkboard and the live oak shadowing my gravel. There was a morning when my phone sat face down on the counter because I was trying not to look at photographs of my sons at a gleaming opening of their new venture on the north end of town. Their arms around their wives, a ribbon curling around scissors like confetti. Acher and Hayes. Ethan and Sloan had hired a drone to take video of the crowd, wide and smooth like a movie. I watched with the sound off, so I didn't have to hear the cheer when the ribbon fell. The caption said, family, like the word was a champagne cork and not a promise you could make or not make. I stood at my sink with my fingers puckered from dishwater and told myself I did not want to be where I was not welcome. Then I went outside and watered the porch petunias for the second time in an hour, and the water ran straight through and off the edge and onto the step where I had sat with Rosa the day before. Maybe it's foolish to put so much weight on a party, but you can tell a lot about a person by whether they say their lines slowly when it matters. My boys didn't tell me about that opening at all. I found out because a girl I'd taught in 9th grade posted a photograph in a dress her grandmother made her and wrote, "Best night ever at Archer and Hayes." In the months after, the calls thinned from twice a week to once, then to text, then to a message on Mother's Day sent at lunchtime because you never remember a Sunday morning until you don't have one. When I called, Sloan answered half the time and said things like, "We're practicing healthy boundaries right now, Margaret," and "Ethan needs to know his wife is his priority," and "We'll call you back when we're not juggling." I tried to believe them. I tried to stand back exactly the way the books say you should when the chicks are learning to fly. After a while, silence stops being an accident and starts being a sentence. I would have kept my cottage and my small life indefinitely, I think, if the day hadn't come when I had 112 pounds of grapes nobody wanted. It was the first bad smoke year. You don't forget the way that feels, smoke in your lungs like a foreign country. Even the cows smelled sad. The big wineries turned entire contracts away with a shake of the head like they were sending back soup. Rose's cousin had a block of old vines that had survived 3 owners and 1 divorce, and the fruit hung heavy and pretty and tainted. He stood in his pickup driving around the valley saying, "Take them." Nobody could afford to take them on paper. "Take them," Rosa said, looking at me the way she does when she thinks she knows my next step. I laughed and cried in one sound. "You want me to cook smoke?" I said, and the dare did a little bright thing in the middle of me. I started playing with the grapes like they were kids in a classroom. Less sugar here, more acid there, a little lemon peel, a long cook, a short one, a hip of rosemary cut with the back of a knife to wake the oil. I blew a small fan across the pot like a crazy person because it changed the way the steam pulled. I taped a coffee filter to my hood vent to see what it would catch. I kept notes like I kept notes on 15-year-olds, precise and forgiving at once. On the 14th try, I watched the surface of the pot do that mercury shine thing that says, wait 32 seconds right now exactly and then pull off the heat, and I did. And when I dipped my spoon, it tasted like late August if late August had a fireplace and a lemon tree. I labeled that jar August Smoke Jam because I believe in not lying to people. And then I put 4 jars on a folding table at the Saturday market with a hand-lettered sign that said, "Salvaged Harvest, Honest Flavor." And I stood there with a loaf of cheap bread and a butter knife like a soldier holding a flag I'd sewn the night before. At 10 a.m., nothing had sold. People stopped, asked questions, wrinkled their noses, and said things like, "Do you think? I heard. Someone told me that once you have smoke, you can't do anything." I nodded and smiled and kept cutting bread. It was 98 degrees and my shirt stuck to my back, even in the shade. Then a kef with a towel over his shoulder and tattoos of herbs up his forearms came by on his break and put a blob of jam on a piece of bread and closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. He did not move his face. He opened his eyes and watched my face instead. It is a funny thing to be watched by someone who has tasted something you have made. It feels like they've arrived at your house by accident and remember they've been there before. The chef bought all 4 jars. He put them on a cheese board that night. A woman with a food blog wrote words that made me feel seen in places the Valley had taught me to ignore. Within a month, I had an email from a grocer in San Francisco asking if I could make 100 jars a week. Rose and I looked at each other over the back of my pickup and said a bad word at the same time. We roped in 4 more women who had raised children while picking other people's fruit, and we borrowed a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon rolls at dawn. We made a little company out of nothing and called ourselves a cooperative so nobody could turn around and tell us we belonged to them. Does money fix the part of you that went cold when your son called you by your first name to draw a line in the sand that didn't need to exist? No, but money is a spoon you can stir a life with. Money bought me the long barn and the live oak. Money paid for a lawyer who read aloud to me in plain words and told me exactly how not to get tricked. Money let me hand a set of keys to a woman who hadn't had a key of her own in 10 years and say, "This one opens the back door. Wednesday is yours." That was the day we started our Wednesday circle. We didn't call it anything. We just started showing up. Me, Rosa, and 6 women who had learned late that family is a word people throw at you when they want something. We chopped and stirred and filled jars and took our aprons off and ate bread with butter and honey like farmhands at somebody's kitchen table. We passed around a shoebox where we put cash if we could and took cash if we needed. We didn't ask questions. We made the kind of laughter that makes your ribs feel occupied again. All of this was in my mind when my eldest son said, "Mom," and put his hand flat on my counter like he was testifying in front of a judge. He said, "We made some mistakes." People say that when they want you to hold a door open and not look at the shoes that scuffed the paint off the bottom. He said, "We overexpanded. Banks want to see certain numbers we don't have. We had contracts cancel on us because of the last 2 bad smoke years and then the frost. We did what we had to on the marketing side, but the market is saturated. Influencers can only pull you so far if conditions aren't right." Sloan cut in smoothly. "We scaled responsibly at first. The numbers made sense. And then the term sheet changed. Our investors wanted speed, and we gave them that. Our lawyer, she smiled and adjusted her cuff. "We're here because we heard your brand got picked up by Golden Thread Foods." She gaze landed casual as a hand on the little plaque behind the register that their rep had sent me with a bottle of sparkling water that cost more than my first car payment. They don't pick up anybody, so I'll be the first to say congrats. That's huge. That kind of distribution? Well done. If she had stopped there, I might have offered her another orange slice, but she did what people like to do when they're trying to be nice and forget to shut up. She kept going. And it's kind of perfect, don't you think? She said brightly. Your success narrative could dovetail with ours. Family, resilience. I can see the campaign, from classroom to cellar door. Hayes women enter the chat. She laughed at her own joke. We could cross-pollinate audiences. There's a lot of unrealized potential here. Levi said my name again, soft, like I was someone who had to be coaxed gently into her own kitchen. He said, "We're in trouble, Mom. We need help." He glanced at the kids and then at the floor. Something in his face was an apology that forgot its lines.
"We'd like a bridge," Ethan said, crisp again, the way he gets when he's made a spreadsheet. "Short-term support with a structure. We put together a plan." He pulled a folder from his bag like a magician, and out came numbers and charts and a photograph of the tasting room I hadn't stood inside. "We need $500,000 in immediate liquidity to cover the balloon, and a further $250,000 to manage payroll and corrective marketing. We can offer equity at a fair valuation. We know you prefer control to cash, but we're talking about family. We can fix this if we move quickly." I looked at the photograph of the tasting room. It was all blonde wood and bright prints and clean fonts on a white menu, the kind of space where nobody lets children touch anything sticky. Somebody had set a sprig of eucalyptus just so on a napkin. I hate the taste of eucalyptus when it creeps into wine. On the wall behind the long counter, in laminated letters, Archer and Hayes. The ampersand was looped like a lasso. I thought about the ribbon falling at the opening and wished myself the kind of woman who had refused to buy eucalyptus soap for 20 years on principle. The grief makes you wear the wrong cologne sometimes. "Before we talk about the money you think you need," I said, "I would like to understand why you needed me to be a stranger to you for 12 years. Sloane's face did the smooth thing again. "We didn't choose that, Margaret. Life gets busy. You know how it is." She smiled at my chalkboard, as if to say, "Look at you, too." "No," I said. "I don't know how it is to have my sons remove me from their Christmases, their births, their porch grills, their Tuesday nights for 12 years. I know how it is to be told we're practicing healthy distance. I know how it is to be told that I'm a dramatic person and that some families work better when the older generation understands that their window for influence is closed. I know how it is to hear my name in your mouth and not recognize that woman. But maybe you can tell me how it is to be you." The girl, tall, brown-eyed, not wearing headphones anymore, looked up from the corner stool where she'd perched. She had a freckle right under her left eye like I do. She watched our hands, not our faces, which told me she trusts hands more than words already, and it almost undid me. I set the photograph down carefully, face up, as if it needed air. Ethan exhaled slowly. He said it wasn't supposed to be like that, and for a second he wasn't a man in a pressed shirt asking for $750,000. He was 8. Standing barefoot at the edge of the Russian River with a fishing pole too short and a patience too long. We wanted our own family, our own traditions. Sloane had a lot of thoughts about. "Oh, please," Sloane said, her tone lovingly surprised. "Don't make me the villain, babe. We both agreed boundaries were healthier. The kids needed consistency. You know how over-involved grandparents can be, Margaret. It creates confusion in nuclear systems. Our therapist said..." I laughed, and the sound bounced off the barrels and surprised me with its size. "Which one?" I asked. "The therapist who told you love shrinks under attention, or the one who told you it grows?" The boy, older, made a sound he swallowed fast. I pretended not to hear. Some sounds are not meant for adults with plans. Levi leaned on his elbows and dragged his hand through his hair like I'd seen him do since he was 9. "I messed up, Mom. I let people be mean to you and called it alignment. I let silence stand in for courage because it didn't make a mess. I missed everything that mattered and called it adulthood. You can be mad at me forever. I'll still know I did that. I closed my eyes. I have not had the luxury of choosing between anger and love for some years. I learned you can pour coffee and anger into the same cup and call it Tuesday. I have been mad, baby. I have also been other things. Work kept me from drowning. So did Raza. So did the women who showed up in my kitchen with hands that could peel a peach in one long kiss. So did a pot of grapes that refused to be thrown away. I opened my eyes and met the girl's. She did not look away. God help me. The human heart is a gullible thing. It will do cartwheels for a look like that long after it has learned the proper etiquette for cynicism. You want my money. You also want my narrative. You want to put Hayes on a bottle next to Archer and call it heritage. You want my hands more than you want my face in your kitchen. You want the part of me that you can put on a brochure. It's not like that, Ethan said, the slight flare of his nostrils reminding me of his father right before the ump made a call he didn't like. We're in trouble. I won't lie. We need short-term support. But we want to fix this. We want you back. You want me back because you need something. You are welcome to want both. I do not have to honor both at the same time. Sloane set her fingertips on the counter and flared them like she was about to play a chord. Margaret, with respect, she said, you don't understand the pressures of scaling a modern brand. The cost of cooperage alone doubled this year. Everybody nods like they know the term sheet, and then they get mad when you follow it. We did nothing ethically wrong. You raised independent sons. That's what you wanted. So here we are, independent, asking for help. That's family. Family is who shows up when the lights go out, not who knocks when the porch looks pretty. We're here, aren't we? And what brought you? I asked, and then answered for her, because I had learned many years ago as a teacher that sometimes you have to fill the silence so the kids don't think they're being given a multiple choice. Money brought you, and fear, and the idea that I have been waiting for 12 years by the window in a house without a porch light so that when you finally arrive, I will kneel and say thank you for the privilege. Levi flinched like I'd thrown something. Ethan's jaw ticked. Sloane drew herself up, the kind of posture you learn from mirrors. If you have conditions, present them. We're here because we're pragmatic. My condition is that I will not fund your apology. Nobody spoke. The boy's fingers had stilled on his hem. I owe you some honesty. And I put my palms flat on the table because the truth needs a table. I did not grow the life I have now out of winning. I grew it out of losing. I lost your father. I lost the house I thought I would die in because we couldn't pay the taxes and the flood insurance in the same year. I lost the right to tell myself nice lies about you two. And then I started putting one jar on a table at a time, and I earned the right to wake up at 4 a.m. and go stir something I loved. I earned my name back. I am not going to trade that name at a discount so you can pretend the last 12 years were a phone call you forgot to return. Levi rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand like he was 10 again. What do we do? He whispered into his palm, the question small enough to roll across the room without bruising anyone. You make your own choices. You allowed them to have consequences. You stop telling yourselves that consequences are a betrayal. You find a way to be honest with your children that doesn't require a villain to throw rocks at. That last part wasn't for them. And I think we all knew it. The girl lifted her chin a half inch. When I was a teacher, I used to watch for that half inch. It was the distance between the first and second draft of someone's courage. Ethan picked up the folder and placed it back in his bag like we had both agreed about a middle we hadn't actually agreed to. Thank you for your time, he said, and this time his voice sounded like the secretary at the car rental desk. If you reconsider, I'll be at the same number. Numbers change. So do names. You should write down mine." He paused like he might. He did not.
They walked back to the SUV in that slow, quiet way people walk when a crowd is pretending not to watch. The girl turned once and looked back. I lifted my hand. She lifted hers. The boy's hood bobbed silently. Sloane's heels left little punctures in my dirt like commas in a sentence I was tired of diagramming. I stood at the counter until I couldn't hear the engine anymore, and then I picked up my mug of coffee and found it cold and sweet. I hate the taste of sweet coffee when I didn't order it. I poured it down the drain and watched the lemon seed chase the spiral like a small, obedient boat. I wish I could tell you I slept great that night. I did not. People think decisions make you tired only when you choose wrong. Decisions make you tired because they ask your oldest muscles to carry new weight. I lay in bed under the open window and listened to coyotes talk like gossips on a telephone line. I listened to the freight train's midnight call go from romantic to annoying to something like comfort. I got up at 2 and wrote a letter to nobody in particular about the day my boys learned how to spell boundary, and I wrote until my pen said no, and I fell asleep with a smudge on my cheek like a child. In the morning, Rosa knocked on the kitchen door without waiting. She never waits. We are beyond that formality. "Well," she said with 2 syllables that included a curse word and a blessing. "They want $750,000, I said, stirring the oats like they had personally offended me. "Caramba," she said, and leaned her hip on the counter. "How much to buy the whole problem?" "More than they're worth," I said. "Not them," she said, swatting my arm with the newspaper. "The dirt. The bank doesn't like bad stories. They like collateral." "They're loan balloons in October," I said, because I had ears, same as anyone. The Wednesday Circle sent texts like the Navy beam signal. "Foreclosure runs in November when nobody is looking because everybody is programming their turkeys. I cannot believe we live here and do not know a better holiday for greed." Rosa snorted. "Eat your oats," she said, "then call Lincoln." Dr. Lincoln Baird wears suspenders and a hearing aid and knows more about wild yeast than any man alive. He used to run a lab in Davis where he tried to teach grapes how to behave. It didn't take. So he came to Napa and taught women how to listen to what grapes were saying. He sits at a folding table in the back of his shop, surrounded by jars that look like a science fair, and eats saltines with honey. He tells me he's going to live to 101, and then he will decide whether to renegotiate. I called Lincoln, and he said, "You can outbid a private equity fund if all they've got is appetite. You've got appetite and memory. Memory eats money for breakfast." I said, "Do you give out quotes like fortune cookies now?" He said, "I do. Come over. We'll talk about rates and rage." By the end of 2 hours, we had a number, a plan, and an LLC whose name Rosa picked because it sounded like a place you weren't allowed unless you came correct. Welcome Table Holdings. Because my grandmother had a lace cloth she brought out only for people who asked, "What can I bring?" in the parking lot. "This is stupid," I told my face in the bathroom mirror that night after I brushed my teeth like I was soldiering up for war. "This is sentimental. This is exactly the kind of thing you make fun of in other people." I put on my grandmother's ring and slept like a small animal in a hollow log. The auction was held in a beige conference room at a beige chain hotel with a beige coffee machine that sucked the joy out of the word. Men with slick hair and women with phones for eyes stood in a semicircle with bid packets and grudges. I wore my mother's pearl studs and a navy jacket I bought at Goodwill the year I won Teacher of the Year and couldn't afford a jacket. I did not know whether my sons would be there. I have never enjoyed not knowing anything. It makes the underside of my forearms itch. They were not. Sloane was. She wore black clothes like armor and a lipstick so red I wanted to wipe it off for her. She didn't see me at first, and then she did, and then she didn't know where to put her face. She put it in her phone. The banks man read numbers like he was calling a barn dance. People grunted. A couple of them texted. I raised my paddle the way you raise your hand when you know the answer and hope the teacher sees the back row. When the gavel, God help me, it really was a gavel, hit the little block, the room did what rooms always do, breathed relief at the end of a task they didn't understand. The property that had tried to make me anonymous for a decade belonged to my LLC by lunch. Rose and I drove through the gate of Archer and Hayes that afternoon in my pickup, the one with the dent that looks like a map of Nevada. The eucalyptus flapped sarcastically. The sign at the entrance looked like it wanted to cry. The tasting room door was locked. We unlocked it because that is what keys are for, and for whom else would you use them?
The interior smelled like expensive candles and a refusal to admit onions exist. Everything was exactly where a stylist would put it for a magazine shoot. The napkins were arranged in a fan. The glassware sparkled like a queen's teeth. A guest book sat open on the counter, and I read cursive with hearts over the eyes next to cursive that looked like somebody had written with a fish. We didn't say anything. We just looked. There is a particular kind of quiet that follows a gavel. It's not victory. It's not shame. It's the space you have to decide how you're going to carry the next thing. In the back, 2 boxes held employee belongings. A penciled note on one said, "Please don't touch," in a hand that made something inside me ache. I made a promise to nobody out loud, not to an LLC, not to a bank, just to the person who wrote that note and their suchness. 2 days later, I called a meeting. I put a card on the tasting room door that said staff meeting, Wednesday, 10 a.m. This is not a drill. If you ever worked here, you are invited. And I signed it with my phone number and -M Hayes. 9 people came. 3 I recognized from the Wednesday market line. You start to know the faces that like chevre. 4 I'd never seen. 1 I had studied taught back in 1998 and who burst into tears when he saw me. And 1 woman with the braid so heavy it could have pulled a truck who said, "I swore I would never set foot in this place again, but my cousin told me to stop being dramatic, so here I am." "Welcome," I said. "My name is Margaret Hayes. I am your new landlord. I am not your boss. I do not want to be your boss. If any of you want to take this place and make it what you wanted it to be when you applied for a job and not a personality cult, now is your time." They look like people do when you hand them a big present and don't tell them where to stand to open it. The braided woman crossed her arms and uncrossed them. The kid from 1998, now a man with premature gray and that same anxious kindness, said, "What's the catch?" The catch is that profit is the last thing on the list, and salaries are the first. The catch is that if one of you is mean, I will make you come stir jam until your hands remember heat. The catch is that if any of you try to make your mother cry for sport, you will have to answer to Rosa. Rosa sat in the 3rd bar stool and drank from my water glass like a queen. "I'm very persuasive," she said. We made a co-op with our thumbprints still on the application. We called it Welcome.Vineyard because sometimes you can be on the nose and that's fine. We wrote rules, how to argue, how to decide, how to fire someone we love if they keep showing up late.
I sent a text to my sons that afternoon. "I bought the banknote," I wrote. "I did not buy you. You can come to the first harvest as volunteers if you want to lift what you once pretended was beneath you. Bring the kids if you like. Wear boots." Ethan wrote back 1 line after an hour. "This is petty, Mom." Levi called. I let it ring once just to make him wait and then answered. "Was I supposed to find out from Sloane's Instagram story, or did she think a boomer would read the trades?" he asked. "I have your number," I said. "Do you want me to say I'm sorry?" His voice did not have an ending. "No," I said. "I want you to quit asking me what to say." The first day of harvest, the valley woke like a horse. The air had that early metallic promise. The sky looked like a clean kitchen floor. We had thermoses and leftover donuts that someone cut in half like a saint. We had a flat tire on the forklift and laughter that fell on the ground and didn't bruise because a forklift cannot be offended. We had the wrong playlist until someone younger than 30 told us the song was about a man who hated his mother, and Rosa turned it off with a swear. We had the braided woman. Her name was Fiona, pointing silently at the end of a row in the gray light, and 6 of us hustling to help because her gesture meant something we would learn by doing. By 8 a.m., our shirts stuck to our backs. By 9, the truck groaned happily under the first loads. At 10, a maroon SUV pulled in like it was sneaking. It parked crooked under the olive tree, and 3 doors opened in sequence like anxious orchestration. Levi stepped out in a sweatshirt and boots that were too new. The girl, no earbuds, had her hair in a tight ponytail, and the boy had a baseball cap low. Sloane stayed in the passenger seat with her phone raised like a drawbridge. Levi walked up to me and pulled off his cap. "We're here," he said, "if you meant it." I asked if you brought gloves. He said no. I handed him mine. "I'll get another pair from the barn. And there's extra duct tape. Welcome table policy. Everyone gets tape on their wrists and the back of their fingers so the stems don't open you up." "Hi," the girl said, hovering just behind Levi's shoulder. "I'm Ava. I like your sign." "Thank you," I said. "I like your boots. They were scuffed." She flush-studied my face for sarcasm, found none, and put her shoulders back a 1/4 inch.
The boy, Jack, I learned, did not look up. That's fine. I have taught boys who would rather dig a tunnel to China than talk. I said, "You can start on the end of row 37, he said. There's shade for the first 10 minutes. He grunted, which in boy means okay, and also, I'm not a person you should look at yet. They moved like people who were learning the choreography in reverse. Levi bunched stems too tightly, and I showed him how to loosen his hand, like the grape was a baby's leg you were rolling a sock onto. Ava kept checking to see if I saw her do things right, and I made myself look away twice and see her the third time because that is how you raise a person who is not addicted to praise. Jack used a knife without thinking about his fingers, and I gently took it away and gave him the duller one and felt his rage flare under his skin like he'd been called stupid his whole life. I did not say be careful because nobody wants to be told that in public. I said watch me, and he did for exactly enough minutes to become interested in not getting hurt. At noon, we ate peaches under the live oak. Sloane had not moved from the SUV. She had taken a photograph of her shoes on the gravel with a caption about harvest vibes. And if I had a nickel for every time someone used the valley as wallpaper, I could build a bridge to parts of myself I still don't have time to visit. She finally opened the door and stepped out like she wanted applause. Her perfume smelled like a decision. "Can we talk?" she said. "We are," I said, and handed Jack a paper plate. "Do you like peanut butter crackers?" He nodded like he had been offered a treaty. She lowered her voice. "This is humiliating, Margaret," she said. "You're making a point." "I already made my points. This is a comma." "A comma?" She made a face like she had bitten her tongue. "A pause," I said. "It is used between clauses that can stand on their own." She laughed despite herself, a sound that made me remember that we are all somebody's child. "You people and your metaphors. You're offering me a dignified exit here. You own the note now. Sell it back to us. Name your price within reason. We'll rebrand. We'll say the right words. Nobody gets embarrassed." There are people who have been embarrassed here for years. They were asked to park behind the sycamore during events so they wouldn't ruin photographs. They were told not to speak Spanish in the break room. They were told family meant silence. That embarrassment is expensive. Sloane's mouth went tight. "You're sanctimonious." "Perhaps, but I am consistent." She stepped closer. Her lipstick had bled a little into the lines around her mouth, and she was the most beautiful and saddest she had been all morning. "You're cruel," she said softly. "You waited for the perfect moment to kneel on our necks, and you're smiling about it?" I did not know what my face was doing. That terrified me. "Cruel," I said, and the word moved in me like a new tooth. "Mom didn't invite herself to this vengeance party," Levi said before I could use my teacher voice and say something that sounded good and ricocheted off the truth. "We invited her to a bankruptcy party, and she showed up with a cake that spells consequences. That's not vengeance, that's English class." Sloane looked at him like he'd betrayed her by refusing to be clever on cue. He looked at the dust on his hems like it was his real name. We went back to work. The day did what days do. It got hotter, then tired, and then pretty again. At sunset, I watched Levi fill up Ben without trying to prove he was a man by bruising the grapes. I watched Ava taking a breath when a flock of starlings rolled over the vines like fabric. I watched Jack hand a bucket to Fiona and not tell her what to do with it, and not expect to be told thank you, and not make any noise at all. It felt like watching a door decide it could be a window. At dark, we lit 2 strings of bulbs over the crush pad, and the smell that rose when the first fruit hit the destemmer made even the bored raccoon stop. You never get used to that smell if you love it. It belonged to my life the way the old chalk smell belonged to my classroom, the way Tom's tackle box smell belonged to my marriage. Even if you don't understand wine, you understand that moment. It is the part of grief nobody tells you about, the part that smells like grapes deciding to become something else. I sat on the edge of a skid with my ankles hanging off and drank water like I had been wandering. Levi sat next to me. He didn't touch my arm. He didn't need to. I could feel the heat from his sleeve. He asked, "Did you keep any of Dad's fishing gear?" I said, "In the shed. Even the lure he called good luck that lies." He smiled. "He taught me how to unwrap that lie. I've been thinking about taking Jack." "Take him. Bring snacks. Don't talk unless he talks." We were quiet together until someone dropped a wrench and swore beautifully. "Do you want to come?" he said finally, making himself look at me. "No," I said. "I want you to remember what it feels like to be good at quiet without me." He nodded. We watched the starlings go dark one wing at a time.
I did not respond online. I did not feed the fire. I went to the Wednesday Circle and chopped 12 pounds of figs with a knife I have had since 1982. I put my anger into the cut and not into my mouth. Rosa told a story about her uncle who only learned how to make eye contact with his teenage sons after a preacher told him to put a toothpick between his lips at dinner so he couldn't interrupt. Lincoln brought saltines and said, "Remember, from the beginning of time, people have been ridiculous and saved by bread." We ate our bread and grieved the parents we couldn't be for our children who weren't asking us to be anything but honest. If you wait for the day when everything is harmonious in a family, you'll miss all the real days. Real days look like someone carrying a bucket with new tape on their hands. Real days look like a boy walking up a porch step with a fishing pole and a bag of Cheetos, like he has a secret he is about to earn. Real days look like your eldest son pulling into your drive and sitting in his car for 22 minutes before knocking so softly you think it is a moth. I opened the door. Ethan stood there and looked at the welcome mat like it was a metaphor trying to embarrass him. "I don't want anything," he said. "I mean, I do. I want my life to not be ruined and my children to think I am not a person who sucks. But I am not here to ask. I am here to say something I wish I had said before I had to be humble to say it." "I'm listening," I said. "I was cruel," he said. He didn't add the usual qualifiers like the price tags they sell in book. "I dressed it up as strategy. I called it adulthood. I was a child with money and a wife who was better at English than I was. That is not a defense. It is a map of how I got lost. I am not asking you to show me the way back. I am asking you to know that I walked away. The vineyard, you buying it, felt like punishment. It was not. It was rescue for people I ignored. I am embarrassed I didn't clap." I looked at his face. It contained every face he had ever made as a boy with a bat. It contained new ones. "Thank you for coming," I said. "You can stop punishing yourself for 17 seconds and sit at my table. We'll see what happens next." He sat. He held his hands like someone who expects judgment and doesn't quite know how to take their hands back if they are told they do not deserve them. "Will you sell it?" he asked, because old questions are muscle memory. "No," I said. "Not now. Maybe never. It will outlast me. I want there to be a place in this valley where the welcome table is not a metaphor. I want my grandchildren to sit under an oak tree and not be used to sell a story they did not write. I want wages to be the first line. I want equity to mean more than a word we learned in a workshop." He nodded like a student who had finally stopped trying to impress me. We ate toast. He cried once when he didn't think I could see. It is a holy thing to let a man keep his dignity while he learns he does not need to create his dignity out of harm. Time went by. We had a frost that tried to lift my entire budget out of bed. We threw sheets on vines and swore. We had a pick that went wrong and a pump that sang. Jack and Levi went fishing. Sloan sent the kids to me when she and Ethan separated, and if you think I am going to tell you how we gossiped about that, you don't know me at all. I taught Ava how to turn an apology into a sentence that didn't ask for applause. She taught me how to use my phone to add captions to a video of Fiona showing a row of tourists how to cuss in Spanish with respect. Sometimes the universe gives you a scene you wouldn't write because it is a cliche and then dares you to believe in it. On a Saturday in June, a bus pulled into the tasting room lot and disgorged 20 tourists who had never stood under a live oak tree. Halfway through the tasting, a woman with blonde hair that had been professionally made to look careless started crying quietly behind her sunglasses. Ava noticed and led her carefully to the back porch like she was carrying a pitcher full to the lip. The woman took off her sunglasses and wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand like a person who has only ever worn sleeves with ruffles. "My mother died last year," she said to Ava in a sudden burst like she had been holding her breath for months. "She would have loved this place. She would have loved you. She would have told me to shut up and say thank you." Ava looked at her and did not try to fix anything. She got her a glass of water and put it on the table and sat. She did not say, "I'm so sorry for your loss." She said, "She was fun.
And the woman laughed through tears like Ava had handed her a life jacket. In the corner of my eye, I watched my granddaughter do the thing so many adults cannot do. She made space and then didn't fill it. After the bus left, Ava came into the kitchen and leaned against the counter. "You can tell when people are in the third act of their crying," she said. "Can you?" I asked, struggling not to laugh because she was exactly right and exactly 16. "They say, 'I'm sorry' to you, but they're not sorry. They're just switching audiences." "That's the kind of sentence you can run a life off of," I said. She grinned and stole a slice of pear from the board. "Don't worry, I'm writing it down." I wish I could say all of this ended in a neat bow with an Instagram carousel and a Thanksgiving table glistening like a story you sell. It didn't. Real life is made of strings that tangle and then get braided by hands you didn't think to ask for help. One evening in October, the sky went the color Anna Karenina might have worn to a funeral. The picker's headlights crawled along the slope like patient insects. I was filling a thermos in the kitchen when someone knocked. Not the moth knock, not the programmatic municipal knock of a uniform, but a knock that didn't know it was knocking. I opened the door. Sloane stood there and looked at the welcome mat like it was a metaphor trying to embarrass her. "Can I sit?" she said. "Yes." And I moved the bowl of pears because that is what my hands do when somebody is about to tell the truth. She sat on the second stool. "You've been right about me," she said. "I'm not asking for cookies. I'm just saying it because it's the only way I know to start a sentence now. I grew up in a house where the word love meant prove it. I learned to stack people like plates so I could serve the table with whatever they thought tasted good. I was good at it. I made money at it. I married a man who liked being served, and I told myself I liked it because it didn't require me to find out whether I liked anything at all. I hated you because you are a person in rooms. You don't become the room, you take up space. I did not know how to bear you. It is terrible when someone you do not like tells you a truth in a way you cannot pretend you did not hear it. It is also a relief, like being handed your own car keys when you've been telling the party you have to leave. You have been cruel," I said. "You have also been something else. I can hold both. I'm old. I can hold a lot." "I'm leaving Ethan," she said. "He knows. The kids know. I am telling you because I told them I would tell you. I don't expect you to pretend you're sad. I'm telling you because I will not use your grandchildren as press releases anymore." "That is the first kind thing you said in this room," I said. She put her face in her hands and laughed. "Maybe the second," she said. "Your jam is ridiculous." "I know." We sat quietly. I gave her half a pear. She ate it like someone who has not eaten pears. She stood to go and then turned back. "You could have bankrupted us more theatrically," she said. "You did not make a show of it. Thank you." "You're welcome," I said, and meant it.
On the day our first welcome table vintages got bottled, Chenin that made your tongue sit up straight, a red blend that tasted like a fence post that fell down on purpose. We had a little party that was not small in feeling. Fiona wore a dress. Lincoln recited a poem he had written on a gum wrapper. Rosa stood up and said a lot of words in Spanish that made everyone laugh and cry, except the ones that made everyone cry and laugh. The kids made a playlist that did not make me storm around and turn off the stereo. At the end of the night, when the last person left and the light in the barn looked like an old painting of a church you visit sometimes but do not join, I locked the door and walked out under the oak and down to the end of the first row. I stood there in the dark and listened to my own heart like it was a faraway train. The vineyard I wasn't invited to had turned into a table with more chairs than I had money to buy. People brought folding chairs. People stood. People sat on the ground. People reached without flinching. Sometimes the reaching didn't land right away. Sometimes it did, and somebody wrote a sentence down and made jam. When I go to bed now, I am not alone. There's a rosemary bush under my window that sounds like 100 women chopping, and if you think plants cannot talk, you have never listened through a night to people who decided they will be family, even if their blood is mad. This morning, I woke at 4, like harvest had never ended. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my pen and a blank page. I do that more often now, not because I am writing a book, not because I want a record anyone else can grade. I write because you can live a life for a long time without noticing that your face in the morning looks like the person you were trying to be for other people. And then one day you look, and it's your grandmother's cheekbones and your own eyes and a mouth that says thank you without waiting for permission. Someone will read this and say I am romanticizing consequence. All right. I have held babies with grape juice on their tongues and old men with hot hands and seen women step into rooms they were told belonged to somebody else. If that is romance, I am a teenager with a poster on my wall of the thing I will not apologize for loving. If you were to ask me what I learned, I would not say, don't loan money to family, because that is a bumper sticker, not a life. I would say this: do not fund someone's apology unless you are also protecting someone who didn't get a choice. Write the rules if you want different rules. Burn the ones that make you small. Bring extra duct tape. Tape your fingers. Learn the difference between oaky and mean. Feed people. Tell them to bring something and mean it. If you love them, tell them the first and second time you see them. If they say boundaries, say yes, the kind that keep children from being splashed when adults fight. If they bring you a list of their losses and ask you to pay it, bring them to the kitchen and give them a knife and an onion and say chop. Levi and Jack will be here in an hour with orange soda and 2 fish that will not be as big as the telling. Ava will come after closing with a notebook full of sentences that scare me with their beauty. Ethan comes on Thursdays with an apology that has stopped trying to sell itself. Sloane moved to the city and started a career telling the truth about branding. Every once in a while, she sends me a photograph of a sign in a restaurant with real words like, "We pay a living wage." And I send back a pair. It is easy to make a moral if you start with a gavel. The better way is to make a table and stand back and let the gavel be a spoon you stir a pot with. If you ever find yourself in Napa on a day that smells like August and smoke, drive down the road where the sycamores make a pattern on the hood of your car like a quilt. Turn in at the sign that says, "Welcome, Table, Vineyard." Don't wear eucalyptus. Bring bread. If there's no parking, park under the olive tree that used to be a place somebody cried alone. It's shade now. We made it that way. You'll hear laughter rolling out of the barn like whiskey. You'll see a girl with a freckle under her left eye showing someone how to tell a stranger the difference between honest and cruel. You'll see a boy handing a bucket to a woman with a braid that could pull a truck. You'll see me under the oak, waving my hand, not because I am gracious or holy, but because I learned late in life that I am allowed to take up space in my own kitchen. The vineyard I wasn't invited to is a place I can tell you about now without my mouth going dry. It is the place I stand and say thank you out loud to the man I buried, to the women who chopped and stirred, to the children who arrived, to the sons who left and returned them in new shape. It is the place I held a gavel in my mind and set it down because we were tired of the sound it made. We are a co-op and a family and a class I teach without a syllabus. People graduate when they notice they're calling their mother back. Sometimes they never do. We reshelve the chairs. We pick grapes. We make jam. We put foil on the labels and laugh at ourselves. We take photographs for the people who cannot come anymore. We write our names on a chalkboard that has seen more names than hangers. We lock the barn. We go home. We come back. If you listen at night, you can hear us learning the words, the lines and the commas and the sentences with their hips. Some nights the coyotes tuck over us. We let them. They are family too, if you're good at the kind that doesn't require dress code. What gives me joy now is not justice. Justice is a sharp knife. It has a purpose and it cuts in both directions. Joy is a spoon. You could hurt someone with it if you try. More often, you stir. More often, you serve. More often, you lick it clean because it tastes like something you got to be there for. I thought for 12 years that I would die without watching my grandchild lean in to listen to a stranger who was crying at a tasting. I thought for 12 years that I would be erased by people who spelled boundary like a charm. I was wrong. I was loud about being wrong in rooms where nobody had the energy for loud. Then I learned to be quiet and make a jar of something honestly smoky and call it what it was. Someone asked me last week at the counter. She was trying to decide between Chenin and Red Blend, a dilemma that tells you a lot about a person. What would you have done if they never came back? I said, Exactly this. Even the auction? She asked, looking pleased at the idea that I was petty. I said, especially the auction, but maybe not with the same ring. She bought the Shannon. She took a picture by the sign. She asked me to stand in it. I did. I stood next to the word welcome and didn't flinch. There are worse endings to a life than a picture in front of the vineyard you weren't invited to, keys in your pocket, jam on your mouth, grandchildren coming to dinner because there's a pie cooling on the sill. There are worse endings than laughter that rolls out of a barn toward a road that used to be a rumor. If you want to know what happened to the eucalyptus, you will be happy to hear we dug it up and planted a lemon tree. It is tiny and silly right now, a stumpy thing with the valedictorian's ambition. Every morning, Fiona talks to it in Spanish. Every afternoon, Jack waters it the way teenage boys water things that are not obviously hungry. When it finally sets fruit, we will make a marmalade so honest, you'd cry. We'll call it Boundaries, then cross it out and write Welcome in Sharpie right on the label. And when I die, which will happen on a day that smells like rosemary and the underside of a barrel and my own hands, they will bury me on the hill where the oak roots know all the gossip. Ethan will stand up and read something too long that tries too hard and makes everyone cry anyway. Levi will carry my ring in his pocket and give it to Ava like a dare. Jack will put a fishing lure in my coat sleeve where nobody will find it until the linen lady curses. Fiona will say all the bad words in Spanish with respect. Rosa will cut a slice of pie and put it on my grave like I might wake up hungry. And somebody will unlock the barn, and somebody will stir the jam, and somebody will pour water, and somebody will say thank you to nobody, because that's the only way it counts. And the vineyard I wasn't invited to will throw its doors open again, and we will keep doing the thing that saved us when nothing else would. We will keep the table set.